Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ryan. A big shout out to both Built Worlds and AUVSI. We're very privileged to be here. My name's Thomas. I'm from PrecisionHawk. It's interesting sitting beside two very large, with wonderful history companies. Our company was founded in 2010, so we are by far the junior company that is here. But we're very privileged to be here, so thank you so much for having us. So a little bit about PrecisionHawk. I mentioned we're founded in 2010 by Dr. Ernest Iran. His background actually talks to a lot of the things that David talked to earlier. He is an artificial intelligence scientist who helped build artificial intelligence on the Mars rover. And so you can think about lots of space-based, government-based, defense-based technologies that he has since taken and put into commercial UAVs, and obviously that in and of itself is that craft that is also sitting downstairs. If you didn't get a chance to look at it before this, please come by, and Brandon is also here from PrecisionHawk, will spend way too much time talking your ear off about this craft. So let's talk a little bit about UAVs in general. So we have seen tremendous growth in the industry, right? Obviously, the AUVSI show down in Atlanta really was a testament to that. Historically been a very defense-heavy show. I think this is probably the first year where commercial activity really was the center highlight of the show. And it was great to see that. Obviously, at PrecisionHawk, we believe there is a big commercial use case for UAVs. And so I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that. But you know, there's different industry studies. They talk about by 2025 creating $80+ billion of economic value with commercial UAVs. And so where that really comes from is these industries that you see here. But what it distills down to is creating efficiency in operations that already exist. Specifically, we believe that UAVs can do two or three fundamental things that enable pilots or users of the craft or of the technology. And that's identify anomalies and detect change. And when you talk about agriculture to oil and gas to emergency response or insurance, it really distills down to those two things. And if you think of it from an insurance use case, let's say there's a disaster, like unfortunately the mudslides in Oso, Washington. So you can think about, by putting a human in that environment, you are essentially endangering that human. You don't know if further mudslides are going to happen thereafter. And instead, you can put an unmanned aerial vehicle with a pilot into that space and have it go fly and survey and either render that data back to the Red Cross for some type of emergency response or to USAA for some type of helping their members by determining whose house was destroyed and whose house is perfectly fine. And so we believe that this technology really just enables what folks are already doing, but it makes them be that much more efficient in diagnosing those things. We are partnered with USAA in particular, and they give us a great anecdote that I like to use in conversations like this. If they can respond 24 hours earlier to a disaster, they can actually save 6 months of lead time on repairing your home, deck, car, whatever it may be that was destroyed by whatever catastrophic event happened. Because unfortunately, there's limited resources in contractors, in folks in the built world, in being able to address that because it ends up being very local. And so by being able to respond quicker, they can get you that service that much faster. We talk also a lot about kind of this monitoring aspect, and whether it's agriculture or oil and gas or infrastructure, detecting change in those resources or asset base is critical. And so with this is kind of just a simple example of showing throughout an agriculture season things you can highlight and find within this data. And so obviously that bird's eye view provides a perspective that you unfortunately cannot get by being on the ground. Things like determining what actually came out of the ground versus determining what you tried to plant into the ground as a grower is really important, because it then determines every management decision that you're going to make for your farm or for your pipeline or for your home they're going forward. Let's talk about a specific built world example. So you can think about mining and allocating large capital bases as efficiently as possible by being able to survey what has changed or what's the environmental condition or current state of my mine. You can then optimize, as the user of this technology, how you are going to respond to that. So doing simple things, and this is actually a very simple use case. You strap a pretty basic sensor onto a UAV, and you can do some pretty advanced analytics, and I don't want to steal a lot of thunder from Goran, around 3D reconstruction and modeling and starting to optimize where you move the resources or the dirt or how you clear paths, etc., so that you're not doing things twice, so that you're optimizing both your human capital and your asset base. And this is the last slide I will talk about on the information side. The key is the information, right? Obviously, UAVs are a tool to collect robust data that cannot be collected other ways. And that is really the theme of what Goran's going to talk about, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that because at PrecisionHawk especially, I mean, we are a UAV company, but we talk as much about the data and the analytics that you need to do after you capture the data from the UAV as much as we talk about the fixed wing UAV that we make. So let's talk about that fixed wing UAV. So we call it the Lancaster. As you can see, it does not weigh a lot. It's quite small. It's literally sitting on a desk downstairs. What has been really amazing is been working with sensor manufacturers to really miniaturize some incredibly sophisticated sensors. I'll give a shout out to one of them. So Headwall makes a hyperspectral sensor that collects 270 spectral bands of light constantly. To kind of put that in terms that I understand, it writes 20 gigs of data in less than 2 minutes of flight. It is capturing essentially lots of different reflectance of pipelines or right-of-way corridors or disaster sites or any type of environmental condition. And that sensor has been miniaturized to fit on a very small UAV so that it can be used for all of these use cases that we talked about before. The other thing I will say is we're also trying to build a lot of intelligence into the device itself. I talked about Ernie, our founder, and the artificial intelligence background that he had. We agree that a pilot will play a key role in actually operating the UAV itself. However, the UAV can get smart in other ways. So instead of just collecting all the data that's out there, why not go pinpoint exactly the data that I need to collect or detect that change with the UAV itself, instead of doing all of that as a post-processing endeavor today. So I talked a little bit about kind of how we see ourselves as this end-to-end platform, and really the goal is generating that information or that answer. I'll highlight a couple things. Beyond the UAV itself, we try to build a lot of really kind of in the field tools, if you will, to optimize users' workflow, because they are going to use this stuff in the built world. And making sure that we can compress data, move data up to the cloud quickly, do some localized processing where sometimes you are very far away when you're working on infrastructure where you don't have robust LTE networks or you don't have Wi-Fi connectivity. And all of those things, truly making the user effective in their actual environment is really important to us, and that is why we have built this end-to-end platform, really to enable that user. So the other thing about the industry growth is really something David touched on with regards to congestion. He was talking about it on a freeway potentially, but I'll talk about it in the airspace. There's different quotes that are oftentimes bantered about. The FAA, I believe, thinks 30,000 drones could fly in the US skies commercially within the next 5 years. A Interesting proof point is DJI, a UAV manufacturer, has already sold 750,000 UAVs. So, you know, I don't know what number is correct, but there's going to be a lot of these things in the air, and obviously that creates congestion. And so, because of this, and I give the FAA a lot of credit on this, we actually approached the FAA about this exact potential problem. And the current rules that are proposed by the FAA would require that a user keep their drone within their line of sight. However, some of those use cases that we just talked about in the built world would actually be suited a lot better if the UAV could fly beyond your line of sight. We are working on what's called the Pathfinder Program with the FAA to enable exactly that. Define safe use cases in the built world for UAV operations beyond the pilot's line of sight. There is still a pilot, however, they physically could not see the craft. Now, obviously, also David's point is that it takes a lot of parties to make this work together. Manned aircraft has current systems that communicate and talk with each other. Unmanned aircraft made by different, in a sense, fleet manufacturers, in a sense, talk within each other, but not necessarily to others. And so it's important to have a system in place, or a technology enabling a system in place that will create this multi-level communication. And that's what we call Lattice. So when we talk about the Pathfinder program that we're working on with the FAA, it's not about the aircraft itself, although we think our aircraft is great. It is really about this technology, which is very similar to technology that's already used in manned aircraft today. The US skies are the most congested skies, yet they are also the safest skies. And that is a testament to technology enablers and air traffic controllers, so both humans and technology. We believe a similar thing will happen with UAVs. So instead of having just UAVs talk within their own fleets, we propose a solution that will move the technology forward, that the UAVs could talk across fleets and even into manned aircraft. Because the scenario we all want to avoid is anything that is any type of incident, right? And so obviously we believe that this piece of technology can enable that, and we call it Lattice. Lattice really does a couple things fundamental. It tracks where the UAV is itself, and then it also manages the traffic on the back end. So it's a dual component system. That traffic management on the back end is the most critical component. This is what today a human does in an air traffic control tower when you are landing at O'Hare on that United flight. However, when we're talking about the large volume of UAVs that will be in the sky, we know that some of that needs to be handled by technology automatically, and then some of that needs to be escalated, if you will, for some type of deconfliction, which would involve a human, which a human does a great job of situational awareness. Technology does a great job of taking commands and responding to them. So I'll kind of wrap with this. Obviously, we're biased at PrecisionHawk, but we believe that UAVs are the future of information gathering technology. We talked about the different use cases in the built world. We talked about making sure that all of those use cases are as safe as possible. And at PrecisionHawk, we feel like we are well suited to work with many industry partners, and probably some of them sitting right here, to really drive that adoption of technology and ensure that it is safely implemented for the best economic benefit or societal benefit. So thank you very much, and yes, I know we're holding questions to the end.